Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome along to our podcast. And today we're going to, with my dear friend Nova, hello, Nova, we're going to introduce and talk about some of our experiences in relation to souls and soul retrievals, retrieving soul fragments from around the universe, from past lives and the infinite void, and also hell. So if you're interested in these subjects, first of all, I just give you a brief disclaimer, which is please know that these subjects are very real and that by watching this podcast, you're at very least consenting to opening up your mind to some of these concepts and that there are some risks associated with at least understanding more and listening to more and giving some of these topics energy. So please practice your discernment and judgment. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask us in the comments. So with that, Nova, what where should we start?
We should start with the question, like, what are soul retrievals? What is a soul, right? We have to understand, like, make distinctions in what we're asking so we can better understand. So I think those are what we should start off with, yeah.
Yay. um, yeah, let me start with, so this is the universe according to John, right? So everyone gets to decide what they believe and know. For me, my knowing is that souls are can be infinite. Like they can just go on for forever. Our souls can live on for as long as they choose to. And in our journeys as souls, we choose how many incarnations we have, how many lifetimes we have, what sorts of beings that we become during those lifetimes. And the general trend seems to be that souls want to learn. So they want to experience life just like us here on planet Earth right now, experience life, experience our all the happiness and all the traumas and all the hard times in our lives that help us grow our souls. And often those there's patterns, repeating patterns through different lifetimes because our souls are trying to learn, like, oh, I didn't quite get it that time, I'll try again. And so these patterns will sometimes repeat until they're faced or healed or experienced by the soul.
Awesome. All right, so then, like, what causes a soul retrieval, or like what has to happen for that to happen?
Sure. So soul fragments are where, so I believe they can happen for a whole wide range of reasons. And a way of thinking about a soul is that souls prefer to be like a whole being. In fact, this is the first kind of, this is all very new to me, but I was shown recently doing a session with my membership group that there's like a central consciousness of our soul, and imagine it like at the center, like the hub of a wheel. And then from the hub of the wheel comes out these different lifetimes of us. And so they're all connected into the soul and they connect in through our higher selves. And our higher self is like the kind of the highest vibration connection or proxy into our soul. So imagine you could have thousands of these like spokes of your wheel going out to these different lifetimes. Just imagine that's a wheel that I'm drawing with my hands. And what happens in different lifetimes is that uh, our soul is learning through these incarnations. So just like John Binnie at the moment, learning how to develop different superpowers, gifts, and abilities, like however you'd like to describe them. And what I see is that sometimes we will use these gifts and superpowers in anger. So, for example, one of my past life abilities, and I've been reactivating in this life, is the ability to see. So, using the third eye to see across the universe, like across all space and time. And it sounds really cool, right? You just think,
Yeah.
that's a great idea. I'd love to be able to do that. And it comes with great power and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And in traumatic situations, what I see is souls cause a fragment. So they actually break off parts of the soul. So you imagine this is your soul and a part of it's broken off. And like thrown away, like thrown into places like either kept in that past life so that can never be found again, thrown into the infinite void, like a universe of just one, i.e., you or your fragment,
Mm-hmm.
and also into hell. And we can talk a bit about the definition of hell shortly. And that this happens when, commonly I see it when a soul experiences trauma where they've used their superpower against others. So they've used it. Maybe their family or loved ones are being threatened, or they're being threatened or killed, and so the the reaction often through a very negative emotion like anger, rage, fear, that they will execute the superpower, and the devastation they cause is often well beyond what they expected, and so the kind of action or perhaps overreaction of the soul is say, I never want to do that again. I never want to repeat that same trauma that I inflicted on others. And so we'll fragment that part of the soul and hide it away.
Okay, so I noticed that I guess the soul will have different ways of fragmenting, like it's in the void or it's in hell or it's like trapped in that incarnation. Is there any reason why? Is there like multiple different options to do, or why would a soul like move that particular fragment like into hell or into the void? Or, there's got to be a reason for those choices, right? It's they got to tuck it away, but they got to put it somewhere. But why those?
Yeah, I don't think it's like well thought through.
Yeah.
It's a very traumatic experience. It's often
Oh
when
yeah.
the incarnation is actually dying. Not always, but so it's in that split second of like, I never want to do this again, this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it causes like this almost like this metaphysical explosion, this energetic explosion, and there is an intention behind it. So imagine
Mm-hmm.
saying, if the soul says, i will I will ensure this is never found again, more likely that's going to end up in a void. If it's something where there's a degree of like self-loathing and shame, these are like really low vibration emotions, and they're much more likely to pull that part of the fragment of the soul down into hell. And the
Uh-huh.
soul's conscious of it. The soul's thinking, I want to hide this from others. So my example of um being able to see around the universe at once, like if you used it against people to or beings to hunt them, I would want to hide that gift so that no one could abuse me to access that gift. And of course, in hell you can hide things, but it's a busy place too. um and sometimes yeah, in the like kind of left in the moment, left in that past life, I feel tends to be smaller traumas, perhaps a gift that was new to the soul. Perhaps they didn't feel it was like super threatening to or risky to other beings.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's some of my thoughts. And what's fascinating is
Mm-hmm.
souls are are even when you divide part of a soul, they're still what I describe as like quantum entangled. So across space and time, they still feel like this, but one half or one part, the fragment, is in a very low vibration state. And so no matter where the other version goes, they're always feeling this torment and torture, and it's horrible, right? So it is surprising the amount of clients that come to me who have an inclination of that there is some degree of fragment or retrieval. Sometimes they describe it as their whole soul being missing, or that there's something that they just can't put their finger on that is causing this like repetition in this life, and they feel like they need to do soul healing work to help that situation.
Yeah, I see. Another question I had is, I know we are talking about like fragmentation as terms of like maybe gifts that were misused, and that created some trauma, but what about if it wasn't like a spiritual gift? What if it was like maybe like a personality trait or something, like it could be like a being's self-love and maybe there's shame in an incarnation and maybe they put that into the void or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do see um situations where, how to describe it? Like there's no real limitation to any of this. There's no real constraints behind it.
Ah,
And I think some of that also comes down to like when you think of the definitions of the void and hell. Um, but I do see some clients going through what I can only describe as like massive self-sacrificial actions where they will hide like a talent that's maybe never been used, or they'll place part of themselves in like a level, a lower level in hell, because they want to keep it there and they're actually hiding it from the rest of their soul. Like it's not like a super traumatic event. Um, and so I had, had one client recently who um they they had a fragment in soul of their soul in hell, and when we visited, they said I had to keep part of me here to experience these low vibrations to be able to express them in my art. And it's like, wow, that is a really big cost. It's like a
yeah.
huge price to pay. And it was beautiful that we could go there, and that the soul was saying, look, I've been here long enough to know how to come back, and I can come back to this place whenever I wish, but I don't need to keep part of me here. And so that was really a beautiful journey, and also teaching the client how to come back whenever they wished, and knowing that by the time we got back up to the surface and did a reintegration, that they would never lose an ability, but they created this like huge ability of like a frequency range where they can drop very, very low and also still survive and have a great, happy, fun life here up at level 0.
Mm-hmm. Another question I wanted to ask. Hold on, please, please tell me I didn't forget my train of thought. Um, oh yes, like so a soul kind of doesn't like to be fragmented. It kind of it's painful, right? I guess it's
Mm-hmm.
like if you can think of it, it's like you have like these friends, and then these friends like don't want to be around you, and then it's like, but it's like imagine those friends were you, and like you did that to yourself, or like self, I don't want this part of you, and I can imagine, I guess like why I understand why that soul would be fragmented, but like if that is still also your soul, then you're also still feeling the soul fragment of what it feels like to be like cast out or put into the void or put into hell, right? So so that's a part of us that is like still connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's why we feel it, right?
that's right. It not. I'm just trying to think how many out of maybe the hundreds of times I've been to hell and back with clients. We can talk about that experience in a minute, but in those journeys, it's quite common to see, I would say, when we visit those lower realms, we either see the heart of the client, so it's like it's a energetic representation of the fragment of the soul, and you feel like part of your heart's missing, and of course you don't, because it's missing, you don't really know, often it's happened prior to this lifetime, so you were born without that part of your heart, but it feels like it's like there's something that should be there. You don't know what it is. And it's like this aching, this hunger, this yearning to reconnect. And sometimes it can be like an inner child, like a younger version of the client representing the fragment. And then other times the actual full bodied being of the past life incarnation that the soul was when they fragmented. Um, and I deal with them in all very similar ways. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like you also suffer. The soul still experiences all aspects of itself, regardless of whether it's fragmented or not.
Yeah, that's like part of the quantum entanglement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like even though the intention was to hide this away, it's like you can't hide it from yourself, right? It's like you can, but you can't because you're still going to feel it because it's you. You just may not be able to like tell right away or like label it or understand it, but you do feel it because it is you. It's just like it's like a part of you that's like a ghost almost, it's like it's you, but it's like it's something's missing, something's different, something's off. And I can't
Yeah.
imagine feeling like that. you know, in this incarnation, like something's missing, and it's like, what is this, you know? That's very fascinating. Okay, and another thing you mentioned was like, is there is there going to be like karma, like in this human incarnation because of like soul fragments? I think you mentioned something about patterns repeating. Can we explore that more?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, where do I start? It feels like one key aspect of the fragmentation process is that um the soul is the one that fragments itself. And so that so the actual kind of the inputs, like the experiences that the soul went through in that incarnation that drove it to make that extreme decision, um are, you know, we're not all perfect, right? We don't all see everything all at once. Like, we're not omnipresent. And so when a soul makes a decision, it's not always making a decision based on the whole picture.
Mhm.
And quite often, I'll either be asking the spirit guides of a client, uh, or an archangel like Archangel Michael, or quite often source. I would say that source energy is one of the most common kind of. It's almost like you get this kind of intervention where I'll be sharing with the client, and they'll be sharing with me their experiences of the trauma when the fragmentation happened. But then what happens is, source will step in and say, and start either kind of speaking to me or ask to channel through me. And the experiences will sometimes include, and it's not insignificant, like maybe 20% of, you know, a couple hundred of these sessions I've done, where source is saying, look, soul, you didn't know everything, right? And that was on purpose. Like, at that time, in that vibration, in that in that supposed act of rage or shame or fear that you did this terrible thing that led you to fragment, you didn't actually know or weren't conscious, or at very least the incarnation wasn't conscious, that there was a some sort of karmic reason for it. And
Mm.
so I'd see, for example, sometimes source will ask the soul and say in advance, and say, I want you to to enact this. This will help rebalance the karmic um, uh, debt for those beings that are busy attacking you and your family or whatever. But it's often like that knowledge and awareness, and that discussion with source is often fragmented itself. So it's like the soul never knew, and absolutely the incarnation would have no idea. And that seems to be really important. That it seems to be something that the soul isn't, like, day to day, isn't consciously aware of until the healing journey, until they're ready for the healing journey. And
All right.
another aspect is that vice versa, that, you know, there was no, you know, there was no kind of greater picture at play, and that actually the soul did a really bad thing and it's now busy judging itself. And it decided, look, because my feeling is that souls get a number of options
Mhm.
to heal, and one of the faster ways of doing it is placing part of your soul in hell, and going through what I often see is these kind of infinite time loops of repetitive trauma, self-inflicted trauma. Like, you know, imagine your worst trauma, and then just like going through it again and again and again. And it's a very intense but effective way of serving your karmic debt, you know, paying that price. um and so when it comes to the soul retrieval part, that's often an indication that has ended, that the soul's learnt enough and punished itself enough that it's okay now to come back to the surface and heal and reintegrate.
All right. That sounds it sounds very similar to kind of like our incarnation as humans. And I mean, it's all interconnected. But based on my understanding, it's like it sounded like we have a soul contract with source, and like to be a soul and have an incarnation, and then um it's like we don't remember that, right? And so
Mhm.
maybe like as we fragment, that was necessary for the balance of dark and light, I guess, in the universe somehow. And because we don't remember that, and we don't know that, whenever we have these traumatic events as a soul that causes us to fragment, like it has served its purpose, and we fragment that, and so it's like a judged part of us that we, want to hide away or ashamed of, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like that's just, you know, it's just like we didn't know, and it's like when we go to Earth and like we do things and we experience things, it's like we don't know either. And it's not until like we start to figure it out that we will realize, oh, this was a trauma or this was a shadow. No, like I healed it, but like you just don't know. And it's like it seems like the principle is still um like present even in like our past lives, or as our other incarnations as souls that caused us like to fragment in the first place. And I thought it was super beautiful that, it's like what you mentioned, like the intervention part, it's like it's kind of like that the inner child healing, where source is like, yeah, you didn't know what you were doing, but you had a purpose for this, but the purpose isn't to make you suffer forever and ever. It's like you're going to realize you need a soul retrieval because you feel it, and then you're going to like remember like, oh yeah, this was all part of the journey and the growth, but you don't have to hide this part of yourself anymore. Does that make sense? I try to like
Yeah.
recap it. Yeah, does that
No,
make
it's
sense?
it's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
really love that. And I'd like to explain a little bit about hell in a moment. And before I do, I do feel that the context that surrounds soul fragments is is actually really empowering, right? Like it's really a message of saying, well, souls get to choose what they do with every aspect of themselves. So we're sovereign souls. Like we get to choose. No one else can come along and fragment us. I mean, they can try and they can try and put us through trauma, but what seems to happen is even when we choose to fragment ourselves, that we find a space, a place, a vibration in time, and that we know that that healing will come back to us, that will bring that part back to us, even though it doesn't feel like that for the fragment. And that there's a lot of self-sacrificial actions that go on. These, especially now where I've seen, very high, very, very high vibration beings trying to come down to earth to help at this time in this incarnation. It's just so hard. And what they, very few do it, but those that do crash land. Like it's almost like they come through the atmosphere and they like metaphysically hit the earth, but they fall too far because they don't how to describe it, they're not calibrated and have had no experience of similar incarnations like on Orion's belt, Andromeda, like these places that are kind of like gatekeeping vibrational gateways where your soul can say, I'm going to have a lifetime or a couple of lifetimes in Andromeda because it's not that dissimilar to coming to Earth, or I could have time on Mars, or I can have, something that's similar to those vibrations and, you know, pay my bills and my taxes and, do all the things in the chaotic human life that you used to. But if you skip all those,
Hmm.
there's this huge risk where what seems to happen is that the much more high vibration angelic soul will end up in the lower vibrations of hell and then have to like gradually work their way back up, and then come into this lifetime. So, and that's a huge self-sacrificial thing. And when I see clients that have done that, and there's been quite a few, their guides are stunned. They're like, I can't believe you did that. Like that was so dangerous. And like you put your very existence at risk. And yet, it typically pays off. It's just an excruciatingly tough time for them.
Oh.
Um, and I will explain my experiences of hell. So I think to define hell, we've got some like shared kind of concepts already. But the first I would say is that um, souls seem to choose to end up there. And whether it's a motivation of dominance and control of lower realms, or whether it's to punish themselves, or um, a mix of all these things. That seems to be parts of the existence of it. Another is that it's a place where we go to torture ourselves. You can argue that those terrible points in our lives, if we're in, if we're suffering depression, deep depression, if we're suffering from trauma and anxiety, like we're in the darkest points of our lives, they are like hell for us. Like it is a living hell for us. And it feels like part of us energetically is in hell. Like we're just putting ourselves in this very low vibration, kind of very trapped reality. And to visit hell, there's a few ways you can go. The way I tend to go is to I'll set up a safe space, and that's the most important thing. Just like I set up a safe space before we started this podcast today, and then I'll invite in Archangel Michael, and I create this like waiting room, and I'll see three doors. There'll be highest vibration timeline, the current timeline, and then the lowest vibration timeline. And this is a door where if you enter it, you'll find the fragment. Like it leads to the fragment of the soul. And then we step through the door into an elevator, or in the UK we call them lifts, and I'll be guided to hit the button, and they go from 0 to level minus 99, to take you to the right level, like the right frequency of hell where that fragment is located. And then once we get there, we're guided to the location in that level. And every level is like hell always seems to be created by those that experience it. So it's like going to this, if you're like a Star Trek fan, it'd be like this holodeck from hell. Like it's just like, but it's real. Like it really is real for you. And it's a real threat to your soul and your existence and those that visit. And quite often it reminds me when I first enter it, if you watched Stranger Things and the Upside Down, like it's a bit like that. Like it's almost like the place begins to morph into this nightmare scenario of yourself. Well, that's quite creepy. My hand. Nightmare scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I don't want to linger too much on some of these concepts for that reason. Like it gives power and energy to these places. But often when I get there, we'll like clear a space around the fragment, and we'll find out where is the best place to begin that. First like the identification process, like what, how, when, how did this happen? And the definition of hell also raises a whole load of other questions, right? Like where is it physically or metaphysically, and how are we in vibrationally in comparison to hell? Like where are we right now? Where's Nova and John right now in this reality? And I see it those levels, that something like, and I know this is changing. It's changing every day, that our current vibration is raising. So these numbers change, but you could describe our current level as 0. And then, so when you're going in and pressing level -1, it's taking you to a lower dimension. And these dimensions go lower and lower and lower in vibration until you hit -99. And yes, I've been there. And yes, it's really horrible. And there
Oh,
are
goodness.
incredibly large, like planet-sized, powerful beings, the very ones that have been dominating Earth for what feels like millennia. But that power is lessening. And it's also because that it's almost like 0 to 99, -99 is a scale.
Hmm.
They're not they're not like the hard and fast dimensions. And I think this is really interesting when you think about angels, for example. Angels struggle to go into these high vibration, angels struggle to go into low vibration, low density dimensions. And it's because it's almost like, as beings, we have this constant sliding shift. So if our vibration is raising all the time,
Hmm.
our ability to go to the lowest vibrations diminishes as we rise up. And every soul has their own unique kind of interval or range of frequency to access these places. So yeah, that's my experience of hell.
Wow. That that's all. It's I mean, it's not awesome, but it's cool because like I'm learning like different things, and it's like so that's cool, But the topic is quite intense, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that it appears that based on my understanding that our soul fragments, they can also create as well. They can also manifest as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, in well, at very least in hell, they're creating their reality, creating their own torment and torture.
Mm.
Um, and and for the first time, I taught a class uh, just a couple of weeks ago how to do this incredibly risky work because it risks my soul and everyone that participates in it. It's risky for your soul to go to hell. But when you get there, yeah, you it seems like really obvious because you understand the context. In this example, the client had a part of them in hell so that they could experience what it's like for other souls to be there and to express them through their art and express how to help these beings on their way back up to the surface. And the only way that you can really get back up is you have to raise your frequency. So you have to heal to get up through the different layers. And that might be seconds and minutes for some beings once they do their healing, or some it could take a very, very long time. But the general point is you can't exist. A being from level -99 can't exist at level 0 because that vibration shift is so different. They have to do the journey to get there. I mean, you can be a pretty mean human, right? Where as humans, we have a really broad frequency range. We can be really dark and very light. And I feel that's one of the things that makes us unique in this universe is our frequency range. But yeah, I haven't really asked, like in your question as well, like I feel there's this ability to, like, can that part of the soul manifest? Can it have its own life? Like all these things feel true, that it's part of your soul and therefore absolutely can. And one way of thinking about a fragment is which fragment is really fragmented, which is the main part. Like there is no main part of a soul. It's just the soul is divided. And so each part of the soul has equal abilities. They just don't consciously have access to all aspects of the soul until they're reunited and begin the reintegration process.
Yeah, but that seems interesting because like a soul is infinite. So we could have like infinite like fragmentation, and it's like, well, where does it even like begin? Where does it even end? Like you said, there's no like main part of it, you know. It sounds to me like the incarnation on earth is like part of what can help us retrieve those soul fragments. I think that's part of the experience of karma to try to do that. And I also think it's not only just Earth, because it sounds like the soul fragments also affect like our other like past lives, which are neither here or there because time is an illusion, right? So it's kind of like you're operating like as a soul with some fragments, but like I think with every incarnation and with every karmic debt that the karmic loops that come in there, I think there's a purpose for continuing to incarnate even with some part of you fragmented, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the most common intention that a soul has for the clients I've experienced has been that their mission to Earth has superseded their own, their own self love, if you like. Like they've said, I will sacrifice myself to achieve that mission, um, and it's to either to hide that superpower because they're not ready for it or they're scared of using it, and or sometimes they're not really aware. Like I don't know if souls fully understand themselves that they have a fragment, and therefore when the fragment should be, when's the right time to begin the healing and reintegration.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I have seen a couple of clients where they've had many fragments, and it's almost like an ability, like the soul could place parts of themselves in many different places all at the same time, and then with difficulty and some traumatic experience, like it's quite hard, but can still reintegrate themselves again. Um, so yeah, it, like many of these things, I don't feel there's a boundary to those experiences that a soul can have.
Yeah.
And there's definitely like uh, uh, both a co-creative aspect to it of the reality and the laws of physics, if you like, that can support it, and then also the superpower act to it. So I feel like each of us are given these superpowers or the kind of seeds to develop them, and they're all beautifully unique.
Yeah, that's it. Like, there's not a lot of boundaries, right? And so it kind of just leads to more questions.
That's right.
um, yeah. Forgot. Oh yeah. So for soul retrievals, like that is a service like you offer. Is it possible that, like, how do I say it's like a soul is not entirely aware that it is fragmented, but like how do people kind of know that they need, the soul retrieval, or can a person do it by themselves? It's because we described it as it's like a feeling that you can feel, right? Or there might be some, I guess, a karmic loop or debt involved, right? But like how do people know to like go to John and like know that they need this thing? Like, how does, have your clients shared like any like stories or any ways of how they come to you and they ask you, hey, John, can you do this for me?
Yeah, it's a wide range. You've touched on some of them, like some of the symptoms and experience people have are that there's this yearning, this hunger. They feel like part of them's missing, but that feeling is not exclusive to those emotions, right?
Mhm.
It can be expansive to include things like, I think I have a superpower, but I don't know what it is, or I seem to have memories of being able to do something, but like past life memories, or someone's told me in a reading I from someone else that I used to be able to do this, and it just doesn't feel like part of me anymore. Sometimes people are under attack, so they're under energetic, negative being or demonic attack from, and that they're experiencing these like continued torturous experiences, and so they'll end up coming to me for some sort of like entity removal service, which I offer, and but then they also find that there's a fragment involved, and that they've been
Oh,
that the attacks actually to try and get to that fragment, or to sometimes it's a self-sacrificial attack, if you like. I mean, it's still really horrible, but the soul is being told, hey, it's time. Like it's time to face this. Let's go and retrieve this part of ourselves. Um, and other experiences include things like during a session, and this will happen at, like, if you book a quantum healing session with me, there is a chance, as it says in the service definition, that we might be doing a soul retrieval. Like, so in other words, the higher self or the guide of the client will say, look, I've I feel I've got a fragment. Let's go and see if it's there. Let's go and find it. And we'll almost always be told the story first. I would never advise you also ask, should someone do it themselves? No, like, don't do it. In fact, even if you've done it before, like, just, as a service I offer to others, it's something that I just continually reflect on, which is, how safe is it for me and my loved ones and my home, my soul, and also of course the clients themselves. I make it as safe as I believe you can, reasonably make it safe, with
sure.
protection, with I've done it many times with archangels, with the help and experience of others, and knowing that you can always, stop and head back. You're not going to, like, you know, cause any harm if you don't do the soul retrieval.
Hmm.
But it's more commonly, I've seen other practitioners really suffer. And in, well, I don't know if this was directly involved, but it seemed to be a contributing factor for the death of some practitioners. And that's just horrible to, to consider. But it's that serious, right? Like, it is there are fun aspects to talking about it, and there are exciting aspects to it. And there's definitely that mysterious, challenging, curiosity that it gives us, because it helps us challenge not just all the love and light, but helps us start to paint a picture of what the lower realms are for. Like, why
Hmm.
are they there? Like, why do our souls interact with them? But yeah, to know that the risks are absolutely real. And yeah, if you ever feel any of those things, like the fragmented part of you, sometimes you're blocked or under attack, or there's this experience you keep going through again and again, and you just can't put your finger on what the cause is. Um, yeah, either come to me or go to someone who you know and trust well, and you can ideally get like a reference about their work. And yeah, be careful of people that just claim to be able to do these things, because you could end up in even more mess.
Yeah, it's because it's a very intense work, you know, like you need like to be connected and like you need to be like super focused and like super healthy and like, you know, working with the guides and the angels and just make sure like your self-care is good, right? Because that's gonna affect how well you do. It's like there's a lot of
Yeah,
I imagine there's a lot of preparation involved, right?
yeah, absolutely. For me, I need like at least a few hours preparation for a session, and afterwards, depending on how intense it was, hours to days. And now that I do this as a business, it's like that's really hard, right? You have to face this hard reality that sometimes you have to take days off, like 3 days off, because your energy is not clear enough to work to help others again. And so having very high standards for your own spiritual and energetic hygiene is a must for this work. Like if you're to do it more than once. And yeah, there have been times, including this year, where I just took many days off and rescheduled a load of client sessions because I knew that it was kind of at least ethically wrong for me to just dive straight into another session, whatever it was, even like a mindfulness meditation with someone or a reflexology session, because I need to be clear to be able to truly be able to help people.
That's great. You're responsible.
Thanks. I've had like those. I've been on the receiving end of horrible experiences where I've seen someone that's done a reading for me and have then published on like social media. Oh, I was like under attack for like several weeks, and you're like, oh, like you were in my energy while you were under attack yourself, and you're trying to help me, but like you can't help others when you're compromised. And I found that shocking. And so I also make an effort, especially with my membership group or people I'm training, or if I'm going to do a session with someone, any kind of proximity to this other work, I'll say, look, I'm dealing with something right now. So for example, if I'm dealing with someone that's going through sustained demonic attack or a form of possession, I'll share that, because it also takes the power away from like especially the shame aspect.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed how shameful I feel when I share this. I'm like, it's almost like, oh, I'm not perfect. I can't, protect myself against everything in the universe. But I don't think the universe could really work if there was such a thing as like invincibility, right? And so it's a very healthy way to do this, is to share these challenges you go through, just like you'd share with your loved ones. You would say, I just had a tough day at work. Like it's like that, but you know, you don't worry so much about your soul. Well, it depends what your job is. Um, but yeah, it can be really worth sharing, at least, you know, with people and where they're at in their understanding.
Um, Another thing I noticed, so it seems like soul retrievals might have like an overlapping with exorcism, and right? Because we did mention that I think a little bit, right? How sometimes like the soul fragment is getting attacked, and then like you end up feeling that energetically because of the quantum entanglement. So that's like another level like I didn't even think about. Like so part of what you do is also like the soul retrieval, but also like exorcism if necessary. And whatever reason that soul was fragmented, whether it was like shame or it was self-sacrifice or it was trauma or whatever, like I guess there's still that I guess like possibility that that could happen to a person. And I did not actually think of that you know that kind of explains a little bit of like why some people feel that way.
Yeah, I would say that soul retrievals are very much within you, right? So there was a whole soul seeking to be whole once more, and so it's reclaiming that part of you that's lost. I define the exorcism work I do, or an exorcism, as being removing something that's external
Ah,
to a soul or being. But I do feel like what you touch on is really interesting, which is it can feel external to the soul, right? That fragment can feel external because it's for our soul, it's been external for some time.
mm-hmm.
Um, there's a huge vibrational shift. You in the healing journey, you have to face this darkness that your soul was not aware, or at very least the incarnation was not aware was possible, right? That somehow your soul could have been, had anything to do with that monstrosity. And I've had clients that have been part of, I'll just use my words carefully, have been part of the collapse of entire universes. Like, if you can think of the most really dark thing, it it's possible. And so the reintegration journey is like that, right? It's like this. Sometimes the client will say, I'm under attack. There's this thing that keeps showing up, and it's actually the previous incarnation. It's part of them turning up. And it's so hard for the client. Like they don't want to like buy a session from me to be told that it's them that they're being haunted by.
Yeah.
um, but it can be, it can be true, and it can take a journey to go on, right? It's a journey of self discovery and self realization. Um, and like last summer, last year in 2023, when I faced, and you encouraged me, Nova, to share my journey, and thank you for that. When I faced the darkest part of me, or the darkest part that was still alive, filled with lack and kind of this almost like this spiritual mania, this kind of maniac side of me, is like that was so shocking to me, to and to my soul. Like it was so hard to accept that that was part of me. And I knew almost from the start of that healing journey, which took about 3 months, that it was true, that it wasn't something else outside of me attacking me. And it's so easy, right? It's so easy to just go, yeah, it's not me. It was awful. Let me tell you about it. I was attacked by this horrible thing. But no, it was really me. And I had to face it, and face it with love and compassion and forgiveness and healing. And so yeah, and to me, it looked like the Venom character, right, from the movies. And it was shocking, and yet I had to face it and heal and integrate. And so yeah, these things are hard to separate. And like we're saying, like there's no hard and fast rules behind this, other than there is definitely an inside of your soul and all the things within you, and then beings outside of you that it sometimes choose to attack.
That kind of gives a whole like level to like hauntings, right? I mean, because that's like literally very spiritual. It's not like the entertainment paranormal thing. It's like a more intense level than like not a lot of people know about. And that kind of does bring some context, to other things I've heard in hauntings or psychic attacks or whatever, because I don't think people talk about this as much. And like you said, it's very easy to mistake something like, oh, this is outside of myself, this isn't me, right? And it kind of reminds me a little bit of like the kind of cliche, like, oh, this place isn't haunted, like you're haunted. It's like no matter where you go, it's like you're the haunted one. And it's just kind
Yeah.
of like, is this like a soul retrieval thing where, it's like the soul fragment is like in hell and it's like getting attacked, and then you're getting attacked, but you think you're haunted, but it's like no, it's actually you, and it's like your soul fragment. It's not actually like the place. Because that makes me wonder, like, because sometimes people do think that it's a place, or sometimes people do share their stories or things like that, and it's like no one knows, or no one knows how to understand like why, what's going on with this person. And I'm just like looking in the context of like what I know now, and like seeing how hauntings are like recorded, or are journaled, or there's some kind of diary or some kind of digital YouTube video,
Mhm.
because those are some things I run into, and I sometimes think about those things. And like of course there's like a handful, then they're probably fake or acting or whatever, but it does kind of make me think about those things in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one key indicator. I mean, again, it's not like a hard and fast rule, but if you've done your work, right? If you're doing like, you know, daily meditations, if you're doing great spiritual hygiene, you've got protection around you with your clear intention each day, you're not consuming like horror movies and ghost hunting shows, like you're keeping yourself energetically clean, and you're doing the inner work, you're finding those shadows, just like we talk about in our podcast many times, like you're finding your shadows and you're constantly working on them. And at some point, if you still feel like you're under attack from something externally, you have to draw the line yourself and say, actually, I think my protection is enough. There's a chance this is happening from within me. It's a projection from outside of me, or it's another incarnation of me. It's something connected to a part of my soul, whether it's a fragment or whether it's part of, you know, my consciousness just now. And it's something I do. Like if I experience a red flag, so a red flag for me would be, you know, seeing a negative entity, like, you know, prowling the perimeter of my home. One of the first things I would do is like check in on myself. Like, is that part of me there? Is it one of my shadows? Is it my fear? Or is it another being? Because what the being wants you to do, if it's really outside of you, is it wants to ignite that fear inside of you.
Yeah.
And so it's actually really empowering to look inside of yourself first, because we're never perfect and we've always got lots of things to sort out.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I feel like also because beings can attach to you and connect with you, especially if you have poor spiritual hygiene and you're consuming like junk food, you know, all this negative stuff off TV and YouTube and other platforms, and you're hungry for it, and you'll know because you're getting excited from the fear. What's really happening, we touched on this in a previous podcast, is that you're actually helping fuel the very beings that you think you're hunting. They're hunting you. And so when you show up to location, if you're going to location after location, whether it's the videos you're watching or
Hmm.
whether you're there, you're the hunter there in person, it's really all the same. And so these, you know, I would say a ghost hunter easily turns up to these locations taking a lot of energetic baggage and attachments with them, and that of their audience. And so it's like bringing a jungle to a jungle, right? And it's no
Yeah.
wonder that you get these often quite fiery like experiences, and it's easy to sensationalize and, you know, make money from these interactions. Um, but yeah, I think they're really it's a really fascinating part of the human condition, that we get enjoyment out of doing this, but at the same time, it's a challenge for us to say, well, am I am I the ghost, or am I bringing the ghost with me? Like what is really happening here, that's when you consider this an energy first universe and not just a human innocently going into a empty haunted location.
Yeah. There's another factor I was thinking because, you know, I think we mentioned before that, you know, the negative vibration of fear, it can, you know, attract these negative forces. And it's really bizarre because I feel like, um, you know, we fear that which we don't understand, right? And that could just make it so easy for us to just go down like this karmic loop of like attracting more because we can't stop thinking about it and because we're afraid of it. And it's like we don't know how to navigate, you know, maybe we don't know how to navigate, how to identify like why am I feeling these feelings, or why am I having these experiences, or what are these experiences, or what is it that I'm experiencing? Like it, you know, just like the crazy aspect, you know what I mean, where
Yeah,
you think you're going crazy and you start to get afraid, you know, and you don't really know what's going on, but like sometimes it's like the panic and the fear, if it's strong enough, can actually like vibrate into your life, and that can also become part of the reality, you know. And so sometimes we can even, you know, create these things by just the feeling alone and then attracting that reality, even though there was nothing there. Or sometimes there is something there, but because you're so scared, it's like you make it worse. Like it's, you know, it's a weird thing for me to bring it up like that because it sounds really scary, but you know, it's like you said, you know, when we have the boundaries like that, that is everything, you know, and our I think in the higher self foundational training and our other podcasts, you mentioned like if you have boundaries and you have intention, like you take precaution, you prepare, like there really isn't anything to be afraid of, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't do this work if I was afraid. Like,
Yeah.
and yet there has to be like an element of, perhaps it is like an element of respectful fear, like where I know that I know the risks I'm taking. I can't be foolish and blindly run into hell. Like I have to do it, understanding all the risks. But yeah, what you're saying, and it reminded me of this pattern where, when as you raise up in your vibration, like you're doing all your work, you're facing your shadows, you're doing your daily practices, and you're got great spiritual hygiene. You're just getting like higher and higher, and you're advancing more and more in your journey. As that happens, there's both the parts of you, the dark side of you that is rising up with you, and also outside of you. So there's the darkness outside of you sees you as a greater threat because you are, because the higher you rise up, the arguably the stronger and more effective you are in whatever intention you seek in your life, whatever your dreams are, your goals, or your mission. Um, and I see this pattern in my clients is what will happen is the entity that attacks them from the outside is going for the very thing that they don't want the client to know about. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you had a superpower of a heart that could heal the hearts of billions of people, entities will go for the client's heart so that the client thinks, no, like this is a fear situation. I'm being attacked because I have a poor, weak heart, poor me, and I'm scared. What do I do, John? And what's often the reality is it's the other way around. Actually, you have a big, beautiful, like universal changing heart. And these entities do not want you to use it, and they want you to keep you in fear and keep you low down. And it's a balancing effect, right? There's no, I don't like, one thing I would say reassuringly about the beings of hell is that they're really bad teamwork, right? Right. They're not very good at working together by their very nature. And one minute they'll be working together and then they'll be eating each other or whatever's happened. It's not to say that there can be coordinated attacks and there can be, we know of concepts like legion or, beings working together, but it seems to like just come and go, and that there's a general lack of, as I was saying, teamwork. And so
Hmm.
that good news is that, whenever you feel under attack by something outside of you, it's a great reflection for you to look inside and say, what's the lesson here? Is there actually a superpower I have in me that they're going for that part of me? Why would a negative being go for, your smallest power, your ability to count from 10 to 1 backwards? It's like, it's not interested. It's going to go for the thing that it thinks will gain the highest yield from feeding on fear. Or if it's more powerful, it'll be something that is really like a big superpower from you that it wants to hold you back because it has an agenda. Um, and I think that's a really beautiful, empowering aspect for both dark and light in the universe.
Yeah. It sounds like there's always a purpose, there's always a reason, like there's always ways to protect yourself, there's always help, you know?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's a balancing thing, so that there really doesn't need to be, the judgment. We don't really need all the fear. It's just, it's all perception, right? And I noticed we're over an hour, so I don't want
Yeah.
to take you take you too long, but if if we're good with ending it here, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'd just like to say, first of all, if any of these topics have touched you as an audience member listening to this, just to let you know, like you're not alone, right? There's many people that go through these experiences, not exactly the same as yours, and not to the same, to exactly the same detail, but know that many people do go through these really tough experiences, and often it's not shared. Like I feel like this may be one of the very few podcasts you'll see where we would talk about such controversial and high risk topics. But you can always reach out to me. you can always book me in for a session. I do practice discernment, so there will be some sessions that I don't accept. But if I feel I can help you, I definitely will. And if not, I'll refer you to another person I know that does this work. Um, and if you're someone that's just really curious about these topics, and you're kind of giving your energy to the kind of mystery and the cooler aspects or cooler sounding aspects, but I would just advise caution. Like, just be really careful. Like, really think about what is your intention. This universe is full of beautiful, mysterious magic, and you can choose what to do. Right, you get to investigate all the things that that feel right to you, but know that some are higher risk than others, and that the risks are very real. And so I just leave it to your caution and your own discernment and judgment, and let you decide what to do. It's a free will universe, so you get to choose.
Yep.
And end of lecture.
All right.
um, but yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be along again soon for another podcast. So if you have any topic ideas, please let Nova and I know in the comments, and we'll be happy to catch up with you soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Sending love.